Hi, welcome to the Elle Rush Show, where I deliver content intended to inspire, educate, and motivate. Engage with me online at ellerush.com and on social media. Enjoy the show. Today, my guest is one of my all-time favorites, Terri Cole, and we're going to talk about a variety of subjects in this episode, from healing mother wounds, establishing boundaries, overgiving, projections, and so much more. Terri is a licensed psychotherapist, global relationship and empowerment expert, and the author of an amazing book called Boundary Boss, The Essential Guide to Talk True, Be Seen, and finally, Live Free. For over 2 decades, Terri has worked with a diverse group of clients that includes everyone from stay-at-home moms to celebrities and Fortune 500 CEOs. She has a gift for making complex psychological concepts accessible and actionable so that clients and students achieve sustainable change. You can learn more about her at terricole.com, and she's also offering our audience a free gift. And you can find that at boundaryboss.me/L. Welcome, Terri. So nice to chat with you again. How are you?
I'm great, and I'm so psyched to be back here with you for another exciting conversation.
Yeah, for those of you, if you'd like to hear my initial interview with Terri Cole about her book Boundary Boss, and we'll talk about boundaries a little bit today, that is episode 484 of the now discontinued Primal Blueprint podcast, but you can Google that and find that anywhere, and that is really one of our most downloaded podcasts and a really great one. I wanted to chat with you about a few topics in your arena of expertise, but particularly one that you do offer a course on, and something that unfortunately is very pervasive: healing mother wounds. Where do we start with that? What is a mother wound?
Well, if we take it from the very top, right, mother wound is basically any issue that you have because you didn't have your mother, or your maternal impactor, as I call it, didn't have the capability to be as tuned into your needs or your desires as you want. And people who are struggling with a mother wound, growing up, you might know that your relationship with your mom, something was weird. Maybe you were always walking on eggshells, or always worried about her disapproval. Maybe she was highly critical, maybe just not present. A lot of times a mother wound will happen if someone has addiction issues, or even someone who's just never home, right? So that a mother wound is basically that. It leaves an emotional and psychological injury to us, but it impacts it. The ripple effect is pretty profound.
In terms of how it affects our relationships and how we see the world, what are some of those ways you see that classically people with mother wounds are effing up parts of their lives?
Well, let's look at what can create a mother wound first, right? Like the circumstances. Maybe your basic physical needs were handled, but you didn't really get the love, care, or emotional security you desired. If your maternal impactor didn't have the ability to mirror your emotions, to show empathy when you were in pain, didn't teach you how to manage your own emotions, didn't have compassion for you when you were in pain, became overwhelmed by your feelings, right? There's this experience, if there's poor emotional self-regulation in the maternal impactor, when the child has a lot of feelings, they become overwhelmed. The mother becomes overwhelmed and doesn't model behavior for managing or self-soothing to the child. If you weren't allowed to express negative emotions, if your parent was very critical or judgmental, if you were parentified. So let's say as a child, you were expected to provide your parent with support and care rather than the other way around.
This happens a lot with children of addicts. They have to kind of step up and sort of take care of everyone and be the mom. Yeah.
Yep. Or if you had a maternal impactor who had untreated mental illness or addiction, as you said, this all can relate to abuse, neglect, and that's basically what creates a mother wound. So now you want to move into some symptoms. So people are like, hey, do I have one?
Yeah. Right. Yes, please.
How do I know? Well, feeling of being somehow monumentally broken. When we have a mother wound, it's like we feel like something is wrong, really wrong with us, but we're not sure what. Potentially never reaching your own potential in life because there's a deep primal fear of criticism, judgment, rejection, abandonment. Sabotaging your own happiness and success, feeling like, having the imposter syndrome, having really crappy boundaries, like disordered boundaries. A lot of times with people with a mother wound, this presents as over giving and over functioning, which of course is extremely exhausting. Um, Feeling unclear about who you are and what your purpose is, having the disease to please, having low self-esteem, not feeling safe to talk true, right? To speak your truth. You could be conflict avoidant and lack emotional awareness, fear of abandonment. What else? Oh my God, that's a lot
Well,
right there.
another one that I wonder if this is one on your list, or I'm not sure, maybe I'm not phrasing it in the right way, but I have noticed that people who have this, and usually it's in the extreme, like they did have an addict, they really had to step up and they've got like a major wound. Maybe they don't even talk to their mom now. Maybe they're just like, oh, fuck, I see her for Christmas, but she's a disaster. And they just have no respect for them. It seems like those women have expressed to me that they have kind of issues connecting with other women.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it makes total sense, right? If
Yeah.
it was unsafe, if you were judged a lot, if you were abandoned, if you were criticized, if you had a very punitive mother, what ends up happening if we don't heal this stuff? Because really, that's what we're talking about, is getting in, digging in, and trying to heal these things. Because if not, Freud would say, he talks about he talked in his work about repetition compulsion. And there's this great quote by Christine Oba, I think is her name. We repeat what we do not repair. So what ends up happening is we will attract, if we had a super punitive, let's say, mother figure, and that's the way that our mother wound came into being, a lot of times we will attract friends who are super punitive and judgmental and make us feel like crap about ourselves.
Yeah,
Right?
you
Because
attract like the bully girls and things like that, who are just going to make you continually feel that way.
exactly. And so it's a repetition that we want to not repeat. And yet we will naturally repeat it if there's no intervention.
Aside, obviously, from therapy, what are some things and ways people can start if they're listening and going, oh man, I have this? you know?
Well, part of it is awareness is always the first step to change, to growth, to transformation. So I think that we have to get really committed on this evolutionary path to becoming radically curious without judgment as to, like, why are we the way we are? But if we approach it from either a self-judgment place, like what the hell's wrong with me, or a judgment of the parent. And I'm not saying you don't have to process your anger at being like getting the short end of the stick in the mother lottery, if that's what happened for you. You have every right to be angry. But when you want to get to the place of changing something, the anger won't be helpful. But curiosity without judgment is always helpful. So I'll give you a couple of journal questions that people can start journaling about if you want to start this process. Just raising your awareness about how it actually was. So when you were growing up, what was your relationship like with your mother or your maternal impactor? Just writing that down can be so helpful. Were you worried about her disapproval or that she would be highly critical of you? So in a way, we learn to hide when we have maternal impactors who are like that. We learn to become chameleons in life because we're always seeking to avoid the criticism. So we write about it and be like, oh, this makes sense. I'm always hiding in my relationships, and this is why. Looking at how present your mother was. Was she present? Was she available physically, emotionally? Was she able to show you empathy and compassion? And write about it. Maybe there were times when she really didn't, and it was, hurtful to you. Or were you parentified? Were there things that you were doing at 7 years old, whether it was taking care of younger kids or making meals or, sort of raising yourself? Write about that, because that's real. And I think, Elle, the resistance that people have to doing this is that I can't tell you how many times clients would say, I mean, that's like ridiculous, Terri. It was like 4 decades ago. Why can't I just let it go?
Maybe it's because you can't. Because
Right.
it's affecting your life. Yeah.
And because you have to honor it.
Yeah.
In
And I
order
know people
to
don't want to
let
go
it go.
back there, right? They don't want to drum up the emotions, but that's the juicy stuff that gets you to move onward and upward.
Exactly. Because here's the thing. If there was trust me, I would have already figured out if there was a way to not go back, I would have already
Right.
figured it out.
Right. You wouldn't even be in business. You'd be like, here's one sentence and you guys can all cure yourselves.
Here's the magic pill. Go.
So, what are some, I mean, obviously not violating patient confidentiality, but out
Mhm.
there in your courses and stuff, what are some profound examples of people healing mother wounds, like how it affected them, what their little bit of their story was, and what was on the other side of them, the lighter side coming out of it, being able to go, oh, I'm finally
Right.
here now.
Well, part of, someone in my class that I just had was talking about how tense she would always be whenever she had to see her mother. And that through the course itself, it was actually the boundary boot camp course we were working through, or maybe it was the mother wound course. No, I think it was the mother wound course. And what she said is going through the process of honoring the child within her, what her little girl actually experienced without minimizing it. Because a lot of us are trained to say, well, listen, I know why my mother was the way she was. She had a terrible upbringing. Compared to how she was raised, she did well, you know? And that is all well and good, but that doesn't heal us. That literally is a continuation of prioritizing the needs or the feeling states of others above our own.
Mm.
So for this woman, she was able to write out, like there's this process that I walk people through in this course where it's like mourning the perfect mother, like
Mm.
mourning what
Yeah.
we wished we had or the capabilities that we wished our maternal impactor had, but she didn't. And really being so honest with ourselves and allowing ourselves to feel the disappointment. Because if you don't process your disappointment, if you don't mourn what you wished you had, you will never be able to fully embrace what you do have. And so for this woman, after the course, the whole course, she was talking about how nervous she was about doing like this annual visit that was going to be a week long. And then she reported back how she was so much more relaxed around her mother and that she had much more compassion and much more patience for her because the little kid inside of her, her child self, had been taken care of, had been seen, had been listened to by her. And so there wasn't so much of the internal, like stomping her feet and being, reactionary to the things that had been painful. And she really felt hopeful that she could have a much better relationship with her mother. And here's the thing, even just having a less stressful 1 week a year with her mother
That's right.
was an absolute win.
Right. They didn't, even if you don't heal the whole thing and you kumbaya with each other, it's better than it was. It is progress. And again, it's when you were talking about her, it made me think of something that kind of sounds harsh, but I'm not sure if you know who Byron Katie is.
Mm-hmm.
She's yeah. And so, she brief story about her. She was like in a halfway house, drug addict. She was a disaster of a mother. She was an asshole. I mean, just self-admittedly like a terrible mother.
Mm-hmm.
And then she had this, awakening kind of thing happened. Everyone's flocking to her. She's completely a different person. And she writes about how her daughter came back and was like, oh, well, isn't this all fine and fucking dandy? Like, where was this
Mm-hmm.
person back when what kind of terrible. And Byron Katie looked at her daughter and she said, mother yourself. And, oh God, that sounds really harsh coming from your own
Mm-hmm.
mother. But I get the larger picture there because that's what this person did, right? They mothered themselves in that moment of mourning the child. They were like the proper mother to themselves almost in that moment, it feels like.
That really is exactly what the course I teach is teaching us to do.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. I also think, and I don't know what happened between Byron and her daughter, but
Sure.
in my own life, you know, my mother taught me she was sorry for the ways that she failed me.
Mm-hmm.
She was sure she would fail me because every mother will fail in some way. And I remember when I was like in my late 20s, I got a card from her in the mail and it just said, Dear Terri, I just wanted to tell you how sorry I was for the decisions that I made that caused you pain. I've asked for God to forgive me. I'm working on forgiving myself. And I hope that one day you'll be able to forgive me too.
Lovely.
And that, what was interesting is that that was like the note I didn't know I needed to
Mm-hmm.
get. And I felt so loved by her just admitting, not telling me why she made the mistakes. And I always say this to parents if they're in therapy with me or in my courses, where they're like, but I did the best I could. I'm like, listen, if you're trying to make amends, we're all going to make mistakes. Just say, I'm sorry for the ways that I failed you. And if they want to talk about the ways that you failed them and how it hurt them, let them. Don't be defensive. You're a human being, right? I'm not saying allow others to be abusive towards us, but there's something that is so compassionate and loving as a parent to just say, I know that in these ways I messed up and I'm sorry. And it's an acknowledgement to that inner child that they didn't imagine their experience, but that they're valuable, that they're important. So I'm not saying everyone has to do that. And yet it's true. We do need to become the good, consistent, kind, compassionate parents we may not have had, for sure. I mean, that really is the path of therapy, is being able to do that and take that good care of ourselves, even if our parental impactors couldn't,
Yeah. And in my personal experience, I mean, I lucked out. I really did. I've never heard anyone speak about their mother like I talk about mine. I got really
Hmm.
lucky. Um, a couple things from my mother that I've noticed then in hindsight as an adult are my mother always helped other women. She was, which I do. Not
Hmm.
surprised. Apple didn't fall far from the tree there. But like, she didn't compete. She never had drama and bullshit Beverly Housewives types of discussions with friends and dramas. Never had any of that. So I didn't really, I didn't either, actually. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Not that you don't have a few high school scuffles with some, with some mean girls or some situations, but for the
Right.
most part, I didn't. And I started to really see it in college. People be hanging up the phone with their parents, like, oh, my fucking mom. And I would call my mom and go, oh my God, like everybody hates their mother. Like, what's happening?
Right.
And then people would always say, oh, classic, like mother shit, mother daughter stuff. And I was like, I don't get it. Like, I mean, I got it, but it wasn't a part of my experience. Now, granted, I had some dad stuff. Um, but one of the
Hmm.
things that was strange is I don't understand this. I mean, maybe it's not that prevalent, but I have seen it a few times where like a mother is kind of competing with the dog. Do you know
Hmm.
what? What the fuck is that about,
Right.
Terry?
Oh, it's so much insecurity. And I see this more though, Elle, now more than ever, where people are so anti-aging and so anti, like they want to be, the people who are like, my mother is my best friend, right? Or the mothers who say my daughters are my best friends. I always think to myself, like, that's an albatross around the daughter's neck. I can probably
Right.
promise you that you can I have an amazing relationship with my mother, but she's not my best friend because she's my mother. And so there will be things that we would never want to talk about. I wouldn't want to, because it would make me feel bad. My parents got divorced. My mother had an affair with her boss. Like, I don't want to know about my parents' sex life ever. Not now, not yesterday, not tomorrow. Like,
Yeah.
it's never appropriate, because there's an emotional boundary violation, sort of, when, and I remember confronting my mother at some point. I was like, Mom, and because my parents did not badmouth each other at all. I was 13 when they got divorced, did a really great job of being kind about the other one, and making it not weird. Like, oh, so how's your mom? Like, could be able to talk about it. They really did a good job for two kids who had no therapy. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I
no,
was
that's pretty
like,
impressive. That's really wonderful. Yeah.
good job. But then when I got to be like 19 or 20, I don't know, I think my mom thought maybe I was old enough now. And I
Mhm.
remember her starting to like tell me stories that were not the best and not like ridiculously inappropriate, but still shit I didn't want to hear. And I remember saying to her, Mom, when you say that, when you tell me that, I don't know why, but it makes me feel bad, like I'm bad. And I knew she would never, ever want that. And
Mhm.
she was like, oh, so what you're saying is that you girls can, because I have three older sisters. She was like, you girls can talk to me about anything, but I can't. And I was like,
Like, yeah, it's a
yeah,
one-way street, motherfucker. That's how this
that's
works.
correct. That means, and my mother has plenty of friends. I'm like, that is appropriate for your friends. I just reposted a friend of mine, Alexandra, Solomon, who's a doctor, she's a psychologist, on Instagram literally 2 days ago. And it says, it doesn't matter how old you are, when one of your parents talks in a negative or critical way to you about your other parent, it's a boundary violation.
Well, and it's interesting. So I've seen this play out on, excuse me, play out on both sides, which
Mm-hmm.
is, hold on a second. Sorry, I just had to clear my throat. I've seen
Sure.
this play out on both sides. So knowing people for a very long time, got divorced, and say the dad is talking a lot of shit about the mom. And then they go to the mom and they go, Dad says this, that, and the other. And what I have, and let's say in that scenario, for example, that I'm thinking of, the mother was like, didn't talk badly back. Didn't even, just was
Mm-hmm.
like, well, he's your father, and that's not true, but just glossed over, did the right thing. And
Mm-hmm.
what's funny is like that dad was trying to get those kids against their mom. Guess what? When you grow up, you know who's wrong. All of these
Oh,
kids
yeah.
in the family that I'm talking about look at their dad like, fuck you. You talked
Oh,
a lot
yeah.
of shit about her when we were younger, and that wasn't right. That was
Yep.
bad parenting. So basically, the parent that keeps their cool, that shit, they win in the end. They will win in the end. And I've seen
Right.
it
But
go both ways.
it's so true. But think about it this way: when you can prioritize the mental wellness and the growth of the child over your own ego, over your own bitterness. And listen, I'm not talking about that, because you're definitely going to have people listening to this and being like, but what about when
Mhm.
your ex is a narcissist and they're literally lying about things and they're whatever? I say, do your best, learn everything you can about narcissism if that's your situation. There are books out there how to co-parent when you're split up from a narcissist. It's so hard, but I mean that's 6% of the population. So we're really talking about, as a rule, to not badmouth the other parent. Do not share information with your children, even if they're teenagers. That will burden them. Like,
Yeah.
your job as a parent is to not burden your child. According to me, listen, this is just, parenting according to Terri Cole, but I think that most people will agree that it's not your kid's job to take care of you, even when you're older. Now, there is a life cycle change that happens when parents get to the age where they cannot care for themselves. And then, of course, if you're dutiful, you will help them in whatever ways you can help them. But I think that a lot of parents will have an expectation, like, I raised you and now, oh, you got successful. Now it's your turn to take care of me, but I'm only 50. You know what I mean? You're like, I don't think so.
Well, and that goes, I mean, I remember when my mother was a single mom and struggling. And she didn't tell me until I was like well into my 30s. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
really glad she didn't, because this is an example of that. She told, and I bawled my eyes out, Terry, when she told me this. She said, back then I only had $50 at the end of the month for anything that could have happened. It
Mm.
makes me want to cry right now. But you know
Yep.
what makes me want to cry about that is how wonderful that she didn't fucking share that with me. No kid needs to know about that stress or be stressed
Nope.
about your stress. And I tell you what, I really, tears in my eyes right now is like a very good job, mom. Like, thank you so much for waiting till I was in my 30s to tell me, because my God, I don't know what that would have done to me if I had known that at the time.
Well, I can tell you from being a
Yeah.
therapist, what it does to kids is it
Right.
creates a crazy amount of anxiety. It parentifies the child. So now they have adult responsibilities on their little kid shoulders. They will try to over function and be like perfect at school or excel some other way, so that there's no sadness that comes to the mother, even if they can't bring more money in. Like, there is so much that goes on. And again, because you'll always have people who perceive what you're saying to the extremes, it's not to say that we shelter them to the degree that they have no idea what's going on in the world, but there is age appropriate and developmentally appropriate sharing with kids. And when it comes to adult things, and listen, it's a luxury. If a family becomes homeless, obviously there's no way to protect a child from that experience. But if it, and so then you do your best to say, okay, but I'm the mother and or the father, and I'm figuring it out. But there are so many other ways that people burden their children, and they don't need to. They don't need to. And it's a long ripple effect of negativity and anxiety that comes from kids who are parentified in that way.
What about fathers and sons? Are there some, I mean, is this the exact same similar thing? What are the differences, or what have you found in that dynamic that might be different than mothers and daughters?
I mean, I'd say that I'm so much more of an expert around the female experience if you were raised as a female. And what I find is that the mother wound is something I created, of course, because people wouldn't stop asking me. So many people are like, "You're such an earth mama. I wish you were my mother," la, 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 online.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, but I can't be. But I wasn't going to do a course because it's involved and it's deep. And actually, I did create a really amazing, amazing course to walk people through this. So, anyway, to get back to your question, father wounds are different because the prescribed roles in society are different. Hopefully that's changing. I think that there is a lot of things changing because there's more acceptance with non-binary folks and gender fluidity, all of what is happening right now. Hopefully we're less stereotyped, but it's going to take a really long time for that to change because you're changing the collective perception of what it means to be male and what it means to be female. And so father wounds for women, right? I write about that as well. That impacts sort of who you choose and your dating life and what kind of romantic relationships you end up in. Father wounds for some, a lot of times, if you have a father who doesn't want a son to be emotional, right? If you have an empathic son, let's say, they learn to stuff their feelings. They learn to erect a very convincing false self in the world. But there's a lot of internal pain around. And keep in mind, you could have either parent wound from neglect. So if you had a father wound, whether you were raised as a female or male, if you had an absent father, it still creates a worthiness wound because little kids can't make the distinction. Even if a parent passes away, the little kid is still like, but I'm the only one at the father-daughter dance who's with my grandfather when I'm 7. You know what I mean? Like the children don't have the cognitive ability to go, oh, they didn't want to abandon me. They passed away, right? They can't even really comprehend that.
Right.
And so those are the wounds that can be left from either a neglectful or an absent or a deceased parent. And that can be on either child, either gender.
Switching gears here a bit, but on the note of worthiness, you did a post and you said, hey, if you find yourself in a healthy relationship, but you don't feel worthy, you'll definitely find a way to fuck it up. So that's so true. I mean, come on. All right. So, but let's unpack that in a minute. I mean, I know that people probably get the general concept, but what are some red flags of this happening to you that could identify, oh no, I might be headed down this pathway. I better get into the worthy category pretty soon and do that work before I fuck it up or, get into the next one and fuck that up.
Right. Well, part of it is, I mean, it's a good sign if you are to the point of attracting a healthy relationship. So let's just start with the positive, right? So if you're in a healthy relationship, it might feel uncomfortable if you haven't had a lot of experience in a mutual relationship and we're really talking about being in a relationship with someone who is securely attached, meaning being in relationships feels natural to them. They can talk about their feelings. They generally keep their word. It's a natural thing to be in this kind of an attachment. So if you've had a lot of long-term relationships, then and they've been pretty harmonious, then you most likely are securely attached, which is, attachment styles has to do with early childhood care giving and how it was given. If you, in the earliest phases of life, if you had a parent or whoever the caregiver was supposed to be, if they were attuned to the child, if when you were in pain, someone came, when your diaper was dirty, someone changed it, You learn if you had a parent who was able to mirror your emotions. So you're crying and the parent is like, oh, honey, what? But they can see on your face that you're having compassion, even as a little kid.
Mm-hmm.
But not all parents can do that or did do that. So if you had a parent who was preoccupied with work or always on their phone or was angry, right? They couldn't handle their emotions if you cried. So instead of teaching you to self soothe, they became hostile towards you, let's say. That creates a different kind of attachment. So more of an anxious attachment because you don't know what you're going to get. So how does that look
It's
in
like an
your
eggshell
relationships?
attachment kind of thing. It's like you're always sort of dancing on eggshells a bit.
Yes, and uncomfortable, right? Because you can be avoidantly attached, anxiously attached, or securely attached. Basically, those are the basic things
Mm-hmm.
that you can be. So if you're avoidantly attached, you desperately want closeness, but when it starts coming for you, you feel overwhelmed and smothered by it. So then you push someone away. So there's that self-sabotaging thing. If
Right.
you're
So is that back
anxiously,
to the,
go
is that
ahead.
back to like psychology 101, where it's kind of like you're repeating a pattern of what you received in terms of love. And now that something new that you wanted shows up, that is the healthy, securely attached, it feels foreign and wrong.
Yep. And scary.
Yeah.
So again, we go back to being really dialed into and raising your own awareness about why do you relate to romantic relationships the way you do. Back to radical curiosity without judgment. Your picker is not broken. It's, real love is not about being at the right place at the right time. There is no magic. As I like to say, it's not magic, it's psychology. And if you can dial into that, get professional help, go through my 400 free videos on YouTube, right? I mean, I have tons of free content out there about everything from attachment styles to mother wounds or courses. There's such a plethora of information available, and a lot of it is available for free if someone can't afford to take a course or get into therapy. That become an expert on yourself. So instead of focusing outward, a lot of times we just get caught up in the drama, right? Of like, can you believe this person cheated on me or they did this or they did that? But we have to start looking for patterns in our own life. And if you have been on the receiving end of somebody being unfaithful 3 times, you are the common denominator there.
Yeah. It's a
And so
harsh reality
yeah,
when you have those days where you're like, damn, I guess it's me. Fuck.
yes, but it's me, but not in a blaming way.
Sure.
It's me because it is some kind of a repetition, right? I call it a repeating relationship reality where we have to look and go, oh, okay. So, what are the questions that I can ask in this relationship or this last one that blew up, let's just say? Okay, so here are the 3 cues for clarity, I call them. Who does this person remind me of? Where have I felt like this before? And why or how is this behavioral dynamic, the way we're interacting, how is that familiar to me? And you will most likely go, oh my gosh, that person reminds me of my older brother, older sister, my grandparent, my parent. And why this matters is because there is something in that repetition that needs your attention, right? There's some injury that is being played out, right? Because all you can do, in life as humans, we can only talk it out or act it out. That's it, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and not to disparage my brother when he was in 4th grade. I'm going to give him some credit. He was in 4th grade at the time. Um, but I was in like 1st grade and, he was responsible for making sure I got home on the bus or whatever. And he had the keys at the time. We were like, again, like latchkey was sort of like a thing back then. It wasn't really now. No one would probably let their kids do it. And I remember, and it was such a painful thing I had to kind of go through later on in life because he had just, wanted to go to someone's house and like basically just handed me the keys and was like, you got it. And I went home and I was trying to get my key into the apartment building and I couldn't do it. And I'm a kid and I'm young and I started to get scared and freaked out and I couldn't open the door. And I go running down the street and there was a stranger guy that had just gotten out of his car. I could have gotten murdered, Terri, but instead, thankfully I wasn't. But I was like, oh my God, I need help. He helped me, let me into my house. He called my mother at work from our phone. And she's like, oh my God, who's a stranger in that? And you know what? I didn't feel that he got the appropriate punishment for it. I didn't feel I got the appropriate apology for it. And there was a part of that that was like, can't count on these motherfuckers. They're going to leave you in the dust. It was another element there. I had to like heal that. I even had to talk about it to him as an adult and be like, that one incident was shit. I mean, I'm not going to blame you. You're fourth grade. Okay. So, but yeah. And stuff like that, you kind of can go back to these incidents. And that was a scary thing that had happened. And thank God it worked out well, but it could have gone wrong. And I think the could have gone wrong part is where my mind was going then as a first grader and having a total crying fit meltdown about it at the time. And again, didn't feel it was appropriately addressed, or again, I got the right sympathy and stuff. I just didn't feel that he got it or anyone really pushed it in there. And I think that was something that was had to work that out. That was rough.
But I think part of what you're talking about wanting to talk to him as an adult about it, I don't necessarily think that's about blame. I think that is the child within you that needed acknowledgement, right? Yes. We just need someone to say, you know what, you're right. That was messed up. That must have been terrifying. And I'm sorry, even if it's from his fourth grade self, Totally. And this is why we acknowledge the experiences we have in the past and I always am saying, like, let's not minimize. And again, not necessarily about blame, but acknowledgement and honoring those young experiences that had these massive, they create imprints on us that follow us for the rest of our lives unless we're able to honor and integrate them, right? Because a lot of not good things, but here's the thing. You become hypervigilant, let's say, because of something like that. I'm not saying you did, but I'm saying, there are experiences around safety. So in one way, there'll be an adaptive functioning that might come out of that, but it doesn't take away the painful experience itself. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yep.
Such interesting stuff. All right. I want to move on a little bit to types of projections. There's all sorts of projections. I don't even know where to start with this other than I can think of a simple one that it seems like such an innocuous thing, but I think sometimes people have experienced this. So maybe it's valuable for other people. So let's say like a projection of one's past self. So for example, let's say you reconnect with someone from grade school you haven't seen for 20 years or something like that. And they make a comment like this happened to me once many, many years ago. Someone says like, oh, you would totally do something like that. And, you want to be like, what the fuck, man? That was 30 years ago. I'm not the same person I was in fifth grade. Like, what kind of shit is that to project? It's kind of like how I felt at the time. So that's like, and I think sometimes parents can do that too, right? They're projecting like who you were as a kid. Let's say you were always messy and kept a messy room, but they're still talking about it. You're like, I've become an adult. Like, I clean my room now. Like, what, you know what I mean? So that's like maybe a very innocuous, simple one. We can talk about some larger ones, but I'd love you to lay out some projections we should be aware for, because I know we feel them when they happen to us, but maybe we can't define it or don't see where they're coming from. And then there's us projecting on other people, and it goes on and on. So I don't know where you want to start with that, but let's unpack it.
Well, let's just look at projection as a defense mechanism employed by our egos, right? So we just know this, right? So when uncomfortable or painful thoughts, feelings, or situations, right, challenge the picture of who we think we are, who we want to be, let's say, our ego can jump in sort of to defend us. So there's a lot of misinformation that happens when the ego is in there because it's sort of manipulating reality. From a psychological perspective, there are two different kinds of projection. We have neurotic projection, and then there's complementary projection, which is really interesting. So let's get some simple examples of neurotic projection, right? So someone in a relationship is cheating, let's just say, and they come home and they accuse their partner of flirting with someone at a party.
Classic.
So that's just classic, right? Instead of owning their own uncomfortable truth and they feel guilty about what they're doing, they project their wrongdoing onto the other person. So there's another one. I always use this one for projection because it's so classic. There's someone new at the office. Let's call her Betty. From the moment you see Betty, you get this weird feeling. You just don't like her, but you're a nice person. There's no reason for you not to like her. So you start thinking to yourself, I don't think Betty likes me. I feel like Betty's kind of judgmental. So it's literally, we don't want to look at the part of ourselves. So it's almost like we project it, instead of it coming from us, we actually have the experience that it's coming at us. So it's like the ego is disavowing our true feelings, because those true feelings, me not liking someone I don't even know, challenges the person that I feel like I am. But it distorts reality. So it's important to be mindful when you might be making up stories about other people. When you're like, oh, I know she doesn't like me. Whenever I feel that way about someone, if I feel that, I always go, does she not like you? Or is there something about her that you don't like? And you don't like that about you, that you don't like it. You know what I mean? Like we can really look at ourselves. So that's neurotic projection, where you can be talking to someone and having a heated conversation, and they're raising their voice. And then they say to you, you're not saying anything. And they say, stop yelling. And you're like, dude, I'm not even talking. That is classic projection, where they're literally experiencing what they're doing coming at them instead of from them.
Yeah. Or another one, these where someone like looks at someone and they're like, geez, someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed today, like a pass. And you want to be like, well, I didn't, but now I'm on the wrong side of the fucking bed because you just said that. Like, like those kind of little, that's like a dig, but it's also kind of an interesting thing with a backhanded passive aggressive communication. But I know it's kind of a classic one too, right? Something like that.
That's so funny. If someone says to me, someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed, I would say, are you that someone? Because I feel fine. Right. Like, I don't know. Right. Someone meaning you.
Right. You're the shit stirrer, not me.
Exactly. The other projection is complementary projection, which is where we make assumptions that other people share our feelings, our opinions, our experiences. And I've seen this a lot in my therapy practice. How many clients have some version of, well, I'm sure everyone experiences this, or I'm sure everyone can do this. Like they minimize their own skill by saying, it's not even that big of a deal. I'm sure everyone can do this. I'm like, no, that's not true. Or they minimize their own problems and experiences by saying,
so are you saying minimize your own qualities and your like the things you should be congratulating yourself on and being proud of, are the things you're like, oh, well, whatever, anybody could do it. It's not that. Yeah. Okay.
Because what we're doing is we are attributing the skills that we worked hard to have to other people. We're acting like what we know, they know. A lot of that, of course, with defense mechanisms, though, this is unconscious stuff, right? So I used to always do that when I was younger. I assumed everything I did was pretty pedestrian and regular, and like I wasn't so super special, and that everyone knew what I knew or felt the way I felt. And when I got older and healthier psychologically, I realized that's not true at all. And why would I make assumptions about what other people can do? I can just ask them or how they feel, Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I wish I could spend 5 hours with you guys. So many questions. So good. So good. Hey, I'm just going to switch over to the topic of overgiving. I had this, and because part of it is like I'm a helpful person. I do like super connecting, and I love that stuff. But prior to that, or I've mitigated that. But back in the day, it's like you overgive, and then you end up doing more for everyone else. And then you're all of a sudden resentful that you don't have the time for your stuff because you're so busy helping. And a lot of that helping is enabling, right? The overgiving can be enabling, which has happened to me too. And then why I stopped enabling the person and helped empower them, and then they could do it themselves. So This is such an interesting topic. So many people do this. It's hard to say no. Because I am a naturally helpful person, I do have to kind of go, like, I'll think of something and I go, oh, I should. And I'm like, what am I? I'm not this person's manager. Like what? I can only so much in my day. I'm not a PR agent. Gosh, how do we start with overgiving? How do we recognize that this is something in us versus being like, oh, I'm just a really generous person, because that's kind of bullshit.
Well, I mean, listen, you may be a generous person, but if you're giving is fueled by fear and obligation and codependency instead of free will and love, then it's not giving in a clean way. And you will of course, if you're overgiving, always, I mean, as a one-way ticket to bitter town, like that's it. There's no way that you will not eventually resent the people that you're overgiving to, because what happens is when we're giving from a disordered or dysfunctional place, we need approval. We want to be liked. We're afraid if we don't do it, we will be left. We have abandonment fears, all of that, right? What ends up happening is that we're angry. And no matter how grateful someone is, they can never be grateful enough because we're not coming from a clean place. We feel obligated to give. So I think the first thing that people can do, if you're listening to this and you're like, oh my God, I'm an overgiver, look at where you're doing it. Do a relationship inventory, because so much of the time what we find is that we have a tendency to do this in particular relationships and then get radically curious about why. What is it about this person that you want, that you're overgiving? And if it's, well, I'm afraid, well, why? I've had clients go, I just realized that this person I work with, who I do all this work that they're supposed to be doing for them, blah, 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 they remind me of my sister who was a bully growing up, who I was really afraid of. And so now what happened is they were having a transference to that person, right? So the little kid in her got activated and was afraid if she stopped doing the coworker's work, that what would happen in her childhood would happen again. She would get beat up, metaphorically, or be rejected. In the realization that she was having this transference, she was able to slowly but surely hand the work back to the coworker. And the coworker didn't love it, but nothing terrible happened. And what we're doing when we recognize, when we're having kind of that, if the overgiving is related to a transference, is that now is not then, right? We can reassure ourselves, I'm not 10 and my coworker is not my bully sister. I'm a grown up and I don't need to continue killing myself doing this work that is not my work. So I think that there's something about looking at the relationship, like who is it that you're overgiving to? Is it your romantic partner? And was that modeled behavior, right? Did you see that somewhere? Is that what you learned? Someone just said in my course today, I've been packing my husband's lunch, making coffee and packing his lunch for 18 years. And he's never once said thank you. And I'm no longer interested in doing that. And, here's the thing, you waited a really long time to have the conversation. And I was like, well, of course, everyone needs appreciation. But before you just quit, why don't you try to have a conversation and just say, hey, do you appreciate me doing this? Because if you don't, I won't. We all need appreciation. That's a part of human nature, right? But that's the overgiving, where she was just doing it on automatic pilot. And I said, why do you think that? And she said, well, it's what my mother did for my father. Right. But you're not your mother and your husband's not your father. And you can change that dance. You don't have to do that just because it's what you saw or it was the behavior that was modeled for you. So we have to really look at our own motivation. What is motivating me to overgive? Where can I start stepping back, doing things for people that they can and should be doing for themselves? It doesn't mean be stingy. It doesn't mean never be generous. It means look at where you're overgiving for your own dysfunctional reasons because you're driven by fear or obligation, and then start stepping back, having conversations, because we want to give from free will and love. And trust me, nobody wants to be on the receiving end of the anger that comes from perpetually overgiving. And then we blame the other people. You know what I mean? We're like, well, you're entitled. They're like, I never even asked you to do that, but you did it for 18 years. You know what I mean?
Right. Well, and I think it's hard for people too, because they're like, well, I've already established this thing. Like, this is the way I've been. And now I've got to change. You're like, yeah, but you got no choice. You either change it or you're still stuck in it. I think that's a hard thing, especially in relationships where they're like, well, that'll be weird for them because they married me as this person. And you're like, well, you don't have a choice because it sucks the other way. You've got to go forward and then be open to what possibly happens there. Such good stuff on that. And I think a
But you're
lot of
still
us,
but Elle, you're still the same person. I want to say this is
sure.
just behavior. We're just talking about behavior.
Yeah.
So you're not changing your core. You're just
Yes.
changing your boundaries. You're just changing what you're willing to do. And yes, when you change the dance in well-established relationships, the interaction dance, the boundary dance, people are going to notice, but you can do it lovingly. You can do it slowly. And the way you feel about that person is going to be so much better that the relationship will inevitably get better from making those changes that are aligned with your authentic self.
Love it. All right. Quick one on this. Apologies.
Mm.
You know what? People suck at this. And yeah, I guess I would say, not like what's a good comeback. You're really great at any kind of comeback. You're like the comeback
Mm-hmm.
queen. I guess I would definitely call you and be like, hey, what's the good comeback for this? And you'd have one.
Mm-hmm.
But when someone's done something where they're really in the wrong, right? Let's say you call them on it.
Mm-hmm.
And then they come back with the bullshit like, oh, I'm sorry I offended you, or oh, I didn't know this was such a sensitive topic. Like it's not
Mm-hmm.
really an apology. What are some
Yep.
examples of shitty apologies, and so we can recognize some of them other than what I just mentioned? And then what can we say to those people when they come? It's like, hey, that's not a fucking apology. Like you're
Nope.
not acknowledging anything. So yeah, give us the rundown on apologies.
Well, crappy apologies are like, I'm sorry, but, right?
Right.
And anything that follows the but is just an excuse. It's a justification. You're not really sorry. You're just trying to justify your action. So don't say that. Don't say, I'm sorry. You feel that way. Don't say, I'm sorry that upset you. I'm sorry. It's if you really want to apologize, you can say, hey, I'm really sorry. Can you tell me more about why that was hurtful? I want to understand. Right. Because here's the thing, I'm not a big person on, I don't think I've ever said in my life, I've never said in my life, that person owes me an apology. Because to me, apologies don't mean shit. What means anything is changed behavior, and that's it. So
True.
what I want is for you to understand me. I want you to care about why that was harmful to me or hurt my feelings. And then I want us to talk about how it won't happen again, and that you're willing to be mindful to not do it again, as I will be mindful if I've done something to harm you, because I love you and I don't want to hurt you. So I think that the power struggle with apologies, because I have so many clients, it's so important. And listen, my husband and I apologize to each other all the time. Being free with saying, oh, I'm sorry, you were right. You said the salt was in that place and I was so sure it wasn't. You're right. I just found it and it was right where you said it was. Not being afraid to be vulnerable to each other, not being afraid to be wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So with regular apologizing, if I snap at my husband and I say later on, I go, hey, babe, I'm sorry I was so bitchy before. That's it, right? And he'll always like try to deny it and be like, you weren't even that bad. Don't worry about it. I'm like, listen, stop taking away my apology. Please just accept it.
Just let me have this one. Yeah.
Just don't encourage bad behavior. But I think that in relationships where apologizing when you've made a mistake or when you've made a misstep or when you've been insensitive or when you're under pressure and you acted like a jerk, because we're all going to do those things at some point. A healthy relationship has a lot of latitude for just allowing the other person to be sorry, right? And I'm not talking about repeat offenders though, because this is the thing that is the problem. An apology without changed behavior, especially if it's a repeated experience, means literally nothing. It means not one thing. It's just
Boy
a
who
way of
cried wolf
placating.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. So if someone says, I'm sorry you feel that way, you can say, hey, what I would prefer, what I would love is if we could talk about why that was hurtful to me, because I really want you to understand me. And that, to me, is better than any perfunctory apology.
Yeah, I love that's a great comeback. It's opening up a conversation. And if anything, that's the key that would, if anything, help change that person's behavior. Not that they all will, but if you've got a chance at it, that's probably the best chance is to respond like that. In sort of closing up in our last few minutes here, even though we've done a whole episode on this, your book Boundary Boss is amazing, and you have Boundary Boss Boot Camp as well, incredible course. in a short period of time, how can we, or can you cliff note for us things that about boundaries that are important, right? Things that we
Mhm.
need to know or look out for. I mean, I when we talked last, if anything, I had more rigid boundaries, like maybe
Mhm.
declaring too many of them, or
Mhm.
right. It's not something I personally suffer with regular basis, but I definitely have in the past, and
Mhm.
it's so important. Part of it, a lot of it is speaking up, which is tough for people.
Mhm.
How can we look at this? Because people out there definitely need to take your boundary boss boot camp, because
Mhm.
so many people have trouble speaking up or declaring boundaries on so many things. I guess maybe start with where we might not think of something as a boundary. So someone out there might be like, oh, I didn't even think about that.
Well, I think that the easiest way to think about personal boundaries is that they're your own personal rules of engagement. It's letting other people know what's okay with you and what's not okay with you. And then it's having the ability to communicate that in words, because it's one thing to know it, and it's a whole different ball of wax to be able to say it. So I just break your boundaries down to your preferences, your desires, your limits, and your deal breakers. So really it means, Elle, it's you knowing you and expressing that. Even just sharing your preferences, where people go, well, I don't see how, that's a boundary issue, but it is, because your boundaries, preferences, desires, limits, deal breakers, they're the things that make you uniquely you.
Mhm.
So it matters when you tell your partner, I really prefer to eat this kind of food, or to, get up early and watch the sunrise, or I prefer coffee over tea. You're just allowing the people who love you to know you more intimately, more granularly. It's interesting stuff. I think that where people don't draw boundaries is what you were saying, the overgivers, the overhelpers. When we say yes, when we really want to say no, because we're just in reaction mode, we're on like auto yes pilot. That the easiest way to change that is to just start by buying time, right? So instead of no more saying yes to anything immediately, buy time. And you can have like 3 or 4 phrases where you go, wow, thank you so much for thinking of me. I have to look at my schedule and I'll get back to you by Wednesday. Or I need to check with my partner. Or I'm not sure what I'm doing, but I'll let you know. If someone says, can you help me with this project? I'm really drowning. I need help. I really need to look at my workload. I'm not sure that I can, but I'll let you know by tomorrow. Instead of just feeling their feeling, right? They want you to say yes.
Yeah,
When you
you're feeling
buy,
their desperation almost, and like responding to
yes,
it desperately, like, oh, okay, well, yeah,
yes, but you don't have to. You can buy time. And when you buy time, it is so much easier to
yeah.
come back and say no when you haven't already given a reactionary yes.
Yeah, the buying time, what a key, what key advice right there. Because again, it's just like take a minute. It's almost like anything else, really. Like you're about to be charged up about something. Hey, be careful on the send. Don't send the text. Don't do the email. Just wait. Give it a minute. Yeah, I mean that's just wonderful advice. Um, wow, I love your work. Obviously, millions of other people do. TerriCole.com, of course, and we'll put everything in the show notes to connect with you. Aside from the Boundary Boss Bootcamp, you have the Healing Mother Wounds course. Is there anything else you'd like to share with us in terms of how we can be helped? Of course, yes, you have amazing free videos and incredible podcasts as well. So
Mm.
there's tons of free stuff out there for people to get on the train of uh, living a better life. Anything you'd like to
But
leave with our audience, or that we don't know that we can access from your
well, I
website?
want to give you guys a gift because I
Oh,
feel like we're all overdoers and overgivers. So I have a free gift, and it's going to be about how you can do less and be more productive. So you just have to go to boundaryboss.me/LELLE. Um, and that will be where your gift is. And it's a video and it's a downloadable guide. You guys can fill it in and really think about, like, how do you want to go into this next year? Right? Do you want to be so scheduled, so exhausted, overgiving, overdoing? Or do you want to have a little bit more peace in this next 12 months? And I'm going to say most of us need a little bit more peace. So I'll give you that URL. It's just boundaryboss.me/your name, L.
I love it. I'll put the link in the show notes. And again, thank you so much for that. So generous. I really appreciate your time, your expertise, so much to learn from you and all that you've given the world. Any lasting thoughts for anyone before we go?
Just that, I appreciate what you're doing and what you're putting out there in the world. And I just want to encourage every person who's listening to dial into themselves. You can absolutely create a more satisfying, more fulfilling life. Move away from judgment, move into radical curiosity, and get to know yourself, like get your PhD in you.
Yeah.
And that will radically change your life.
I love it so much. Thank you again, Terri. And for everyone else, we'll see you soon. Hey, listeners. Over the years, a ton of companies have approached me to collaborate, but I will only promote companies whose products I believe in and that I actually use and consume on a regular basis. So let me tell you about some of my favorite companies that I can offer you discounts for. Rep Provisions, an amazing company doing incredible things for our planet, topsoil, and animals with regenerative agriculture, and it's my #1 source for quality pasture-raised meat and chicken. Visit repprovisions.com and use code L15 for 15% off. I'm also obsessed with a company called Carnivore Crisps. They make a lean, all-natural, and delicious alternative to conventional snacking, made with just real meat and real salt. Totally addictive, and my favorite ones are the beef brisket and the ribeye. Visit carnivorecrisps.com and use code PALEO10 for 10% off. I also love and regularly use Paleo Valley products. They make amazing supplements and delicious paleo products. I use the superfood greens powder, grass-fed beef sticks, the organ complex, and their bone broth bars. I love the lemon and apple. I also use their essential C complex and more. Visit paleovalley.com/promos/LRUS for 15% off. I also love Primal Kitchen. They make delicious paleo-approved, gluten-free, grain-free, soy-free, and no refined sugar products, and I use them daily, from their collagen powders and sauces and marinades to their avocado and olive oil. So good, so healthy. Visit primalkitchen.com and use code L10 for 10% off. I also love paleo powder and use it almost on everything I cook. They make incredible seasoning blends, and they also have these incredible grain-free coatings that feel just like crispy breadings that you would have had prior to knowing that there's another way. So visit paleopowder.com and use code L15 for 15% off.